Megan Thee Stallion, whose real name is Megan Pete, accuses Tory, whose real name is Daystar Peterson, of shooting her in the foot 2 years ago in the Hollywood Hills. Tory is charged with 3 felony counts: discharging a firearm with gross negligence, assault with a semi-automatic firearm, and carrying a loaded, unregistered firearm in a vehicle.
Breaking the Tory Lanez trial, we had opening statements. Opening statements are still actually going. We had to pause midway through for lunch. Better than TV. If you watch the prosecution's opening statement, you would say guilty. If you then watch the defense's opening statement, you would say, what the hell is the prosecution thinking, charging him? Basically, the prosecution started with this story. They said that, hey, they're all at the party, and Tory is leaving the party with Meg. They're in the car. An argument breaks out, during which Meg says and insults his skills as a rap artist. This leads to a situation where she gets out of the car, and he shoots at her feet and yells, "Dance." And then she ends up at a hospital, and a doctor takes out 3 fragments of bullet wounds from her foot. Now, if you just hear, and the prosecution says that Kelsey, the other woman in the car, is going to testify that Tory shot Meg. And Kelsey has a text message where she texts somebody that, hey, Tory shot Meg. And then the rest of the prosecution's case is based on all these calls and texts where Tory's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so drunk. He never says that I shot him. He's like, oh, I'm just so sorry. I'm so drunk. So question what he's apologizing for. So that's the prosecution's case. Seems pretty easy. Then the defense comes up, and man, it gets spicy. First, the defense goes, they're not telling you about half of what's going on. The most important thing they're not telling you about an eyewitness who saw 2 women fighting, Kelsey and Meg. And so let's talk about why them 2 are fighting. Let's talk about how she was in the front seat. The gun was caught in the front seat. Let's talk about how she might have gunpowder. She does have gunpowder. Let's talk about how this has nothing to do with the fight between Tory and Meg and everything to do with the fight between Meg and Kelsey.
We kind of heard the reasoning as to why Kelsey Harris has the gunshot residue on her hands, and that came up in a preliminary hearing earlier on in this case, and it makes sense. If Kelsey as well as Tory Lanez are in a small confined area, like an SUV, and one of them shoots a gun, that residue doesn't have far to go, and it can land on the person's hands who shot the gun, but also any innocent person who's in the car as well.
And then the defense starts dropping the bombs. He basically says this, that they're in the car. Yeah, they left, but do you know why they left? They left because Kylie and Tory were in the pool together. And Kelsey and Meg both felt some type of way about that, to the point that Meg felt really some type of way about that. And she was really trying to go, to the point that eventually, because of how Meg is acting, this is according to the defense, Kylie Jenner goes to Meg Thee Stallion and says, it's time for you to leave. They all leave. The defense's point is what happens in the car is this. Tory questions Kelsey, hey Kelsey, why are you backing up Meg for me trying to, get it on with Kylie Jenner? Meg has been snaking men from you your whole life. I hooked up with you, Kelsey, and then Meg went behind your back and hooked up with me. And Kelsey, this is not the first time. You had been hooking up with Ben Simmons. Meg went behind your back and hooked up with Ben Simmons. You had been hooking up with the baby. Meg went behind your back and hooked up with the baby. And so the defense starts dropping all these grenades. The crowd is captivated. The jury is like, oh, what's going on? And there's every reason to believe that there could have been a fight here, not between Tory and Meg, but between Meg and Kelsey. And the shooting could have not been Tory. It could have been done by any one of the other people in that car. What does all of this mean? Well, I'll tell you a couple things. First, Corey Gamble, Kris Jenner's husband, is going to testify, so this will continue to be must-see TV. 2, the judge is terrific. I expect a very fair trial. The lawyers on the defense side are terrific. I don't know what the government lawyer was doing, giving an opening presentation that made it seem like the most open and shut case ever, when in fact there are huge questions, including an eyewitness who saw 2 women fighting, suggesting that you have to explain that theory to the jury, and you didn't. So I don't love the prosecution's opening in that regard. Stay tuned. We'll have the full coverage here. It's up and it's stuck in the Tory Lanez trial. All right, we're back with the rest of the update in Tory Lanez. So we are taking our afternoon break. There's going to be more testimony at the end of the day. But right now, let me catch you up on what's happened since lunch. The defense continued and concluded their opening statement. They confirmed that their theory of the case is going to be that Kelsey was the shooter. Tory was just trying to break up the fight. Then the prosecution went up. They put on a police officer as their first witness. This is the police officer who arrived at the scene of the shooting. He testified about how he saw gun casings, blood spatter, This was a big mistake in my opinion because the defense attorney ended up tearing this police officer's testimony to shreds. He basically got the officer to admit that they did not use the proper evidence markers to mark and identify the location of every piece of evidence. So the police cannot tell you where blood was found exactly in relation to the gun casings, where based on the trail of blood the victim would have walked around. They can't tell and paint the whole story of what happened when the person got out of the car. Why, if you can't paint that story, why, if you didn't use the evidence markers, why, if you purportedly have a very simple case, did you waste your time making your first witness a police officer whose testimony is going to get torn to shreds by the defense attorney? Big mistake in my opinion, if you ask me. From here going forward, the defense will always be able to point out that the government's investigation is completely incapable of telling the jury about the movement of the victim outside of the car. So if you're trying to inject reasonable doubt, alternative theories, you've now done a great job setting it up that the government's story has holes in it. All right, we wrapped up the first day of Tory Lanez trial testimony. Let me tell you what happened at the end of the day. This will be a two-parter. On this first part, let's cover what prosecutors believe is their key piece of evidence after the testimony they expect to get from Meg and the other woman who's in the car. So here's the prosecutor's point, that there's a jailhouse phone call reminder to everyone: when you get arrested and you're sitting in jail, they are listening, they are recording. What you say on that phone will be used against you. According to prosecutors, Tory calls the other woman who was in the car, Kelsey, and basically admits to shooting and apologizes profusely to her. The problem with that theory, according to the defense, is that, well, he never says he shot her. He's just apologizing profusely, and he could be apologizing for a lot of things. According to the defense, the apology is for basically blowing up Kelsey's spot and revealing that he had been in a relationship with both of them. What side will the jury believe? It's way too early in the evidence. That call on its own means nothing. In fact, the evidence that was presented was through a detective. They asked that detective, hey, when did you listen to this jailhouse call? What can you tell us about it? He basically said, yo, I heard it last week. They asked me to go retrieve it from the system. I retrieved it. I'm playing it here for y'all today. What does it mean? What does he mean? What's he talking about? I don't know that from that, so I couldn't really tell you, and he can't. And the jury is going to be looking at the rest of this evidence to really decide that, hey man, when this guy's calling Kelsey and saying, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to, what's he talking about?
The big question, is Kylie Jenner going to testify? There's a lot of speculation about that. Look, Tory and Megan came from her party. They were Instagramming videos with her. The defense said that Tory wanted to stay at her house. And the defense also says that Kylie asked Megan to leave at one point, but there is no indication that Kylie was subpoenaed. And the alleged shooting, of course, happened after this group left her house. The defense also says that Corey Gamble will be testifying. He's, of course, Kris Jenner's longtime partner. He was also at that party.
Kelsey Harris will absolutely testify and take the stand. But the major question in this case is, what's going to happen on cross-examination when the defense starts asking questions of Kelsey? Are they going to be able to create some form of reasonable doubt to suggest that she's the shooter and she's merely covering for herself and Megan and pointing the finger at Tory Lanez?
So the defense attorney for Tory Lanez is saying that over the course of the next couple days, we're going to prove to you at trial that they were at a party, that in the pool was Tory and Kylie, and that Megan Thee Stallion started feeling some type of way and got in her feelings about it. That they tried to get Megan to leave, but she's like, I'm not leaving until I get Tory with me. That I'm taking my man and I'm going. That's what the defense attorney is trying to set up. The defense attorney said that it got to a point where Megan Thee Stallion was making things so awkward that Kylie Jenner went up to her and said, it's time for you to leave. And that's when she left, and Tory,
left with her,
being a gentleman, left with her, didn't stay in the pool with Kylie, and then they all leave, and then the mayhem ensues. But this little piece, I think, is very interesting to the masses.
Did you have an intimate relationship with him?
Like sexual?
Yeah. Did you, Megan, did you have a sexual relationship with Tory Lanez? Yes, that's my question.
I didn't have a sexual relationship with Tory.